Welcome to Feminine Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Farrar. Each week, I bring you an inspiring conversation to help you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife so that you can not only survive, but thrive in your second half. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and today I have a treat for you. My guest is Stephanie Krikorian. She is an author, a journalist, and a celebrity ghostwriter. Her book, Zen Mender, is a book about a decade-long enthusiastic quest to fix everything that was never broken. She started her journey of self-help by writing self-help books for celebrities. She was a ghostwriter. Then she found herself drinking the green juice and got hooked on self-help, which began her journey from self-help to self-healing. So without further ado, Stephanie, thank you so much for saying yes to me.
Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. And of course, your book is really, really, really enjoyable. But since my tribe is listening to us talk about this wonderful piece of work, why don't you tell me a little bit about what led you to write this book? Give us a little bit of a backstory.
Sure. It's funny. I made a career of getting no credit for anything I've done. So I ghostwrite books for people. And before that, I was a TV producer. So I would write scripts for reporters or anchors. And so I've done a lot of articles and things like that and had my name in a byline here and there. But really the big show, I never had my own book. But I didn't set out to write a book. I lost my job in television in 2008, and I started ghostwriting as a way to, make ends meet. And when I would write self-help books or diet books for other people, I would also do research. So I would read a book that was similar or see what the competitive field was like. And then I started getting hooked on self-help books. And then things went next level. So I really started hiring healers, coaches. I took dating seminars. I went on every diet known to man. I did the numerologist, the astrologist. I did everything. And I think part of it was, I made the decision to start this new career and give it a try. But there was a lot of uncertainty. I was coming screaming toward 40. I was still single at 40. I was now jobless, but working for myself. And so there was this reinvention that had to happen. At around the same time, the vision board was becoming a big thing, this idea that you could manifest things just by, cutting out pictures of a beach house. And of course, you're going to have one then. And so I kind of look at that as the gateway drug. I got caught up in that. So all these things were happening at the same time. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I spent a full decade on this Zen bender. I went on a bender chasing Zen. And one day after this very grueling session of Reiki, and I'm walking out on the pier in Venice Beach in California, listening to a self-help book that the healer had recommended. And I literally I stopped dead in my tracks, and something that was said on the book was so stupid. I was like, okay, this is stupid. And I took off my headphones and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is insane. So it really was an organic journey, to use one of those self-help words, that I thought, maybe that's an article. Maybe people would find it funny that I did all this crazy stuff. And then I sat down and wrote a book proposal. So it wasn't I didn't set out to do that. It happened. And then it became Zen Bender.
It's so funny. I totally get the self-help addiction, because there's something in us as human beings. We want to figure things out. We want to naturally improve and make things better. Most people, right? And then somebody has an experience like you. They write about it like you, and we resonate with part of it like I do with you. And then you begin to go, off the deep end at some point, and it becomes like the only answer to your question or your quest, shall we say. So let me ask you a question about that. You use the word reinvention. Part of what I do is I help women reinvent themselves, transition from where they've been to where they want to go. And there's this window in the middle, right? You said you didn't really know what you were going to do. You weren't expecting to lose your job. You're screaming toward 40, and now you're single and jobless. What do you do? So tell me a little bit about your reinvention journey. What did that look like? Because I think a lot of people, of course, think there must be some kind of step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but give me a little bit of your journey of reinvention.
So it was, I think a lot of people do have step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're planners, and I'm a planner in general. I was a producer, so I planned every second of my time, back time my day, so to speak, an old TV talk. But this was not planned. This was more accidental and a little radical. I lose the job. I go on 31 job interviews at maybe in my time, the worst job market. People were interviewing me and then they were losing their job. It was this domino thing. And I actually did end up getting 2 job offers. And I took one of them, the one that paid a little bit more, not the one that, would have been more exciting for me. And I had already started on the side ghostwriting a book for a nutritionist. And then the agent we worked with had another one. So here I was, melted down after I lost my job. It defined me. I actually loved it. I don't view it as the best thing that ever happened. It happened. It wasn't fun. And I land another job, and I quit that job and went out on my own to ghostwrite. And it was almost a moment of insanity, but also this moment of clarity. And I write about it a little bit in Zen Bender that maybe it was, I don't know, a year and a half in, maybe a year and a half in. I was sitting at this bar that I used to meet my friend at for dinner. And I just kept thinking, this job I could get laid off at too. It could end. And I have this, again, I called it the grappa epiphany because I was staring at this wall of beautiful grappa, I don't know how you say it, bottles. And I thought, no, bet on you. You are a survivor. Bet on you. And everybody thought I was crazy. I had struggled so hard to land this job and had freaked out about losing it, but it wasn't great. It wasn't the right fit. It wasn't as fun. Everything had changed. And for this brief moment, I mustered up this confidence and this gut feeling, and I quit my job and I went and worked for myself. And it wasn't a plan. I had never had a dream of doing that. I didn't, have some big desire to, figure out that I was okay with, jumping off a cliff and hoping that net would form. But I did it. And it was a gleeful feeling when I knew it was going to happen. And I had never felt more certain about a decision ever. And so sometimes just these it's sort of accidents. And I kind of explain a lot of the moves I make in my life as accidental. And you can reinvent because the world has changed a little bit. You've got this, whatever, the gig economy that allows you to do things like we're doing right now from a distance that wouldn't have been possible before. You can hire an assistant that lives on another coast. You can do all of these things. And so as long as you have the imagination, I don't think you need the plan.
I like that. As long as you have the imagination, you don't need to plan. I think when I get hung up, when I hit glitches, it comes down to the overthinking, overanalyzing, spending too much time, trying to get every single duck in a row. I saw a quote recently that said, I have no ducks, I have no rows, I only have squirrels, and they're going to a rave.
That's great. Well, I am an overthinker. I am Overthinkers Anonymous. But what I've found, and only in reflection, is I do that on smaller scale things. Like I will overthink the details of my day or a trip or a dinner party to the point that most people probably would never even, that's the producer in me. But on these major, large life decisions, not that I haven't given them thought, but I haven't done that meticulous TikTok or play-by-play of how this is going to look. I've just seen it and I've done it. And I don't know where that comes from because I am generally a planner, but somehow, buying an apartment in Manhattan, I spent more time planning which television I was going to buy and researching which television I was going to buy than this apartment, major real estate investment. The next move I made was out of Manhattan to the, South Fork of Long Island. That was an accident. I didn't plan that. This jumping off a cliff to start a business and reinventing, I did. And I think sometimes it's a strange mix of being an obsessive planner and then strangely not at the bigger times. So I don't know if that's smart or I'm insane, but that's how it's gone.
What has been the greatest challenge for you on this reinvention journey?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Stress exists no matter what you do. I think. I don't know these breezy people. I've never met them. But the stresses are just different. And I think with all of decisions in life, everything's a trade-off. So, a few things on being a writer, people don't think that's a job. So there's, a little validation required at times. At first, everybody thought, oh, you don't work. They think you don't work. So you could go for lunch, or they could ask you to do favors. Can you go watch my dog? Can you go let the work person in? Can you go? And so the reinvention, no matter what you do, you have to treat it like a job. So you have to sit down at a certain time every day. You have to, take breaks. You have to say no to things. And that was super hard at the beginning. Scheduling my time wasn't so much a problem. It was the incomings that were really getting me. The way you manage your money is completely different. There is no regular income coming in. So you have to make that does require planning and understanding of when you're getting paid. And that was a learning curve to figure out, how books pay out, which isn't always when you're finished the book. Sometimes it can take a year to get the full payment. So you've got to plan for that and be prepared. And I think the hardest thing is managing the stress of when there isn't work. You have to understand that's okay, because it will come. And when there is work, you're all hands on deck and you don't take a vacation, you just work. And so I think, I'm years and years in, and, there's still speed bumps along the way and hiccups, but it's a different kind of stress than working at a job that you go to every day. That maybe was the hardest part of reinvention.
That is a huge adjustment, because when you have a job, you do things that you're told to do, and it's within this confine and this structure, and you get there at a certain time, you do your thing, you have lunch, you do your thing, you go home. Sometimes you may take work home, sometimes you may not, but it's very compartmentalized. So I think one of the greater challenges when you reinvent yourself and become your own boss, or you start your own company, that's where it gets fuzzy, because no one's going to tell you to get out of bed. No one's going to tell you to do that thing that you do. And then sometimes you're not even sure what it is that you do, No,
it's true. I always say, when someone's like, oh, Monday's a holiday, I don't know what day of the week it is now. It doesn't matter, because I will work 7 days a week when I have a project, and then I won't work when I don't. So I never know what day of the week it is. You do have to set your own parameters and get up and do things. And there are deadlines when you take something on, and you have to also find other work while you're working. And I've gotten, I'm fortunate the past couple of years, things have sort of been pretty good. And I know that could change overnight and there could be another drought, but I feel at least I'm prepared for that, knowing what that's like. So, but yeah, it's true. There's no one cracking the whip. There's no one saying, enjoy your weekend off. Because when there's work, there's no weekend off. There's, you're on. And I think the other thing is, I noticed at first the camaraderie, you go to an office, and I worked in a fun office with people, and TV was fun. And then you work by yourself. And so when you get like a human in front of you, I found myself at first, I would just like barf out a conversation so fast and just be like so excited to have someone to listen, talking, someone to talk to, and and then I realized, okay, you got to peel that back, because people aren't going to talk to you anymore because you're just so excited. But that was hard too. So it's completely to go from like sort of a more isolating job, or a fun job, to an isolating job. So those are things you don't know going in. And that's the hard part of reinvention, is the unknown, I think. You can't plan for all of that.
What is it that you learned about yourself in this process as you look back? What is Stephanie about now? Were you able to kind of see your blind spots potentially? Maybe are you a better, I know we're talking about self-healing over self-help, but do you feel like you're, Stephanie 2.0 after this experience?
I think in some ways, yes. And then the old Stephanie, creeps up. But I think I learned I am a survivor. I can do anything I need to do to get through the day. And I mean that work-wise. I don't, not emotionally. I'm saying I can get the job done. I know that. I've learned how to juggle things a little differently, though television news was a lot of juggling. I've learned it on a kind of larger scale, how to juggle. I learned that about myself. Everything's not a 5-alarm fire. I think I learned that. So, that still creeps up a little because everything, when you have a deadline in news, is a 5-alarm fire. And I learned that it's not. And part of me, I also learned misses that. I love urgency and like someone screaming at me to get something done. And I miss that, which I didn't think was a thing you could ever miss. But I learned pacing, and I learned limits, which I think, what's that word?
Boundaries.
That's such a weird thing that I didn't know you had to understand. And I think that is one thing I learned along the way. Though I also think when someone's paying you money to do something, you're on call all the time. So I sort of have a little split on the boundary learning. I am aware of it, but I also am not sure. I don't turn off. If someone's got me on a project and they need me, I'll be there. So I think you learn a lot, and I think you continue to learn. I don't think it's ever, okay, I've learned it all. I am learning something new every contract I take on, every project I take on, every, crazy Zen bender thing I tried. I learned a little nugget of something along the way.
Absolutely. I think that's what makes life livable and interesting, is having the opportunity to grow. I think it's probably something that feels overwhelming to people, that stepping out into that unknown, that stepping out into that, this or that, not both. Or, you're looking at a life of yes, and, yes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, because you now can, because you are over yourself.
Well, that's a great point. That was also an early realization that when you have a job, you go to your job and that's the one thing you do all day, and that's all you kind of do. But suddenly when you are working for yourself, there's opportunity everywhere to do all these other things. So when you have, 5-minute break, I write my own book, or I write an article, or I take an improv class, which when you have a job, it's sort of hard to find your way out of that. But when you have control of your own time, you can schedule those things. So I could take class in the middle of the day because I felt like it, which was so great and so much fun. And I could go to the beach in an afternoon and work on Sunday instead, go to the beach on a Wednesday and work on Sunday because I could. And so suddenly you have this, it's a double-edged sword. You have this blank slate of time to fill, and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do all day? But you fill it, and you fill it with things that you want to fill it with, and when you can work, and you could not do that with a 9 to 5 necessarily. But all of a sudden, there's all these things you can do. I can go spend a month in California if I want. And how exciting is that? And I could never have done that before, but nor did I ever imagine I could have done that.
That's a good point. When you're reinventing yourself, when you are shifting from something that you identified yourself as, because you said, that job was Stephanie. It wasn't your job, it was Stephanie.
Yes.
And I think that's an interesting conversation for a lot of us women. You've just recently turned 50, and you're hitting that kind of tipping point where some people literally freak out about life, or they're feeling unsure about their viability, their vitality, their value, or where they want to go. And so you might have been forced into that in a different way by like losing a job 10 years ago. But a lot of women are in that place where they're hitting what feels like a milestone, and maybe they aren't where they want to be. Maybe their life isn't what they wanted it to be. And we get very stuck in that idea of what we've done is who we are. And it locks us down. And when that shifts, like our kids grow up, or our marriage falls apart, or our job goes away, or whatever it is, we lose ourselves because that was who we were, as opposed to really taking the time. Because you're talking about chasing Zen and going through this whole thing from self-help to self-healing really is a journey of finding out who Stephanie is, right?
Yeah, and it's also, I think, to your point, when we reach certain milestone ages, I have a couple of thoughts on that. Just that, we all crave this roadmap to where we're supposed to be, but we don't really know where that is, nor should we. I think I think at 40, I thought, oh my God, I'm supposed to be married. I'm supposed to be successful, whatever that is defined as. I'm supposed to have this house. I'm supposed to do that. I'm supposed to live here. And I think I don't know if it's with age or just with this experience of jumping, and hoping this net will form. I don't feel the urge to have that, destination anymore. I just kind of trudge along as best I can. And if something, catches my eye and I think, oh my God, I'm going to try that, I do. And I think we get hung up on that a lot. And I think the numbers work against us. I did write about it a little bit in the book, but as obsessed as I continue to be with losing weight or, the struggle with my weight, I never felt that same anxiety about age. And I still can't tell you why, but as I was heading toward 50, I know many, many people who melt down. I can't believe I'm going to be 50, but I didn't really feel that. I feel like every year, everything has gotten a little bit better every year. There's ups and downs, but there are always going to be ups and downs. But I do feel fully excited about life and all the great stuff. Definitely drew the long straw in life. And, there are moments where I'm like, oh my God, it's a bad day. But generally speaking, it gets better every year. And so as I was heading toward 50, I didn't really feel all that stressed out about it. I actually started, when people asked me, how old are you? I didn't say 49. I said, I'm going to be 50 this year. And the other thing that I thought was interesting, and I think we're all at fault for it, is I find a lot of people say, 50, you don't look 50. And then I say, well, what's 50 supposed to look like? Because why are we hung up on what is that? Is it bad? Am I supposed to only look 40 and 50s? Oh God, you don't want to look 50, but maybe I want to look 50, or maybe everybody's 50 is great. And why is that a bad thing? And so that's a whole nother issue of chasing, this youth is the only thing, but I think we got it better than they got it in their 20s right now. And that's based on experience and life and all the things that we've learned along the way. I mean, sure, your things sag and that sucks, but, I think life experience compensates for that, and knowing what we know now is much better than not knowing any of it.
Oh my gosh, yes. That was like preach into the choir. I so agree. I often say, where's the contract that I signed that said I was going to look 20 for the rest of my life? Like, where is that contract, and why do we all feel like that's absolutely our goal? And we're at that cusp. I'm 52 and you're 50. So we're at that cusp where I see a lot of women, they're still able to chase youth to some degree. Does that make sense? Like, that's harder to do at 80. But 50 is still in that place where you can become a bodybuilder. You can, there's certain things you can do. And I'm not knocking that, but everybody has their different goals, right?
Right.
I think this conversation is giving permission to those women who really don't want to spend 4 hours in the gym, who don't want to get Botox, who don't want to, alter themselves. They just want to enjoy the life that they have as the person they are and continue to mellow like a fine wine, as opposed to trying to spend our energy looking back. And I think that's the challenge in this aging conversation, talking about chasing Zen. It's like, you're trying to chase being at peace with yourself, looking backwards to be something that you were 20, 30 years ago. But that's not who you're meant to be at this point in your life.
Right. And I think there's a flip the script aspect to it. So I go to the gym, and I think I do it for a different reason now. I do it for my health, because I move different. I have, differently when I feel strong. I feel more confident and empowered. I walk with a little bounce to my step. And that's not about looking younger. That's just about health and feeling good. And I talk about it in the book. I get a little squirt of Botox, and I am okay with that. And I don't do it to help for other people's perception of me. I do it because it makes me happy when I look in the mirror that I don't have that line in my forehead. And I'm okay with that. It's the reason you're doing it, I think, is what we need to, adjust. So there's also, look at Hollywood. Like, if someone stands up on stage and they have wrinkles in their face, the, social media trashes them. If someone stands up on stage and their face is fully plastic, we trash them. And I think it's not fair. And it's an issue women have to deal with that men do not. And we need to get past that, unless we're all going to sign an agreement that nobody's ever going to get Botox again. So everybody looks the same. Everybody looks their age, and that's fine. But do it for you is what I think. And, in like this idea, don't stop chasing thin, start chasing strong, stop chasing youth, start chasing, confidence, whatever, just chase something different than you were pre-programmed to do, or that people have made you feel like you need to do, because it's stupid. And I think that's something you realize with age. Do it for the right reasons,
To be completely honest, I think part of this, reinvention for a lot of women, we hit this age and some people don't know who they are. They don't know what they want because they've been doing what they think they should do as women.
I think that happens a lot. And I think that happens, as a single woman. I think dating is a lot of pressure to meet, that acceptable. It doesn't make people uncomfortable that you're still single at 50. Conversation. So I not to keep referring back to the book, but I did talk about that in the book, that I had accomplished all of these things, and whether their accomplishments big compared to the rest of the world, maybe not, but for me, they were something. And so you still would list your accomplishments, and somebody will still always say, oh, but you're still single. Oh, but you didn't meet anybody. Oh, but you're not married. Oh, but you don't have kids. And that's their checklist, but it does get to you. And so I think that's the thing we need to, I think it's getting better. I think actually our generation might have been, maybe we're the first to sort of get to that point where we had these opportunities at work and we made these decisions. And I wouldn't have given up those opportunities at work for anything, though, I would obviously like to meet someone and all of those kinds of things, but not for those reasons that other people place on you, not because it looks good or it's important for someone else's checklist. If it's value added, great. And I think that's the thing that comes with age too, as it pertains to dating, is the checklist, your reasons are different now. So if you're not value added, don't bother. I don't need your time. I don't need your money. I don't need your baggage. I don't need any of that. So don't drag me down. That's kind of the way I look at it. It would be fantastic, but you've got to be value added. And I think when you're younger, you're looking for the father of your child, or you're looking because everybody else is getting married. And oh my God, everybody else has a date to go. I mean, going to a wedding alone is like mind numbing. I always hated that. Or New Year's Eve, where you just want to like pretend you have something to do, but you don't. And so all those things, that's all this pressure. And when you can finally get rid of all that pressure, it's just loosening the valve on that. That's a big one for me. The dating is a lot of external pressure. The not being married is a lot of external pressure. And I think people think there's something wrong with you after a while. And, so you have to live with your own checklist, not the checklist that others or society or whatever is imposed upon you.
How have you navigated that singlehood in your own mind, in your own mindset? Where have you come to now in being single? I talked to another gal a few months back, and she didn't get married till after 50 for the first time. Like, she had never been married, and she actually wasn't necessarily looking for it. Cause like you said, she had the same thing. Like, okay, if this is going to be a hassle, never mind. Cause as a single woman, kind of what to expect and how your life has a rhythm, and why would you saddle yourself, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? So how have you navigated that journey for yourself as a single woman, your own attitude and coping with the just really insensitive questions and things people say?
There are a lot of ways. I've done all the, dating websites, and the craziest piece of advice that I got with this dating seminar I went to, I hired a dating coach. I did all of those things early in my Zen bender. And the one nugget was, really juicy nugget was from the seminar, leave your hair long and shiny so men will think you're fertile and then they'll want to marry you. I mean, that was an actual piece of advice. And that was mind blowing. And I did all the speed dating, and the analogy I make is it's a little like shopping at Marshall's. Once you get to my age, everything's picked over and you kind of grab something because it's there, but it's not, it's seconds. So I don't remember the exact moment, but I had this realization that I could go to Paris by myself for a weekend, and I booked it. And that's when I was like, oh, you don't have to wait to have a partner in life to go to Paris. And that was somehow life altering for me, because then it became more out of want, less out of need. And it was that never having a date for a wedding, never having a date on New Year's Eve, never having anyone to go to Paris with. And I'm like, screw it, I'm going to go to Paris by myself. And I had the greatest trip ever. And I ate, fancy lunch, and I booked fancy dinner, and I walked around miles and miles, and I stayed. And I was like, okay, that was it. And I think the other turning point is when you're realizing your ovaries are no longer of, child producing age. That loosens the valve a little bit too. And you're not under this urgency to find the father of your child if that's the way you're going to go. And, I know that's one of those things that there's no kind of turning back once you make that decision. And it wasn't a decision for me not to have children. It just never materialized, and never met anybody, never wanted to do it by myself. But there is that loosening of the pressure at that point where you're not scrambling to find somebody to have kids with. So Paris and children, that was the turning point.
Was that Marissa Tomei? My biological clock is ticking.
Like this. Yep.
It's such an interesting thing. I think it doesn't really matter what path you take in your life. There's always going to be some kind of judgment on that path. You got married too young. You waited too long. You should have gotten married, or you should have done that when you were, quote, younger. And that's part of the conversation I love to have with people is, do we though?
There's a lot of noise out there. And I think part of it is an industry, the wellness industry screaming at you all the time to fix everything. And if you fix everything, you will achieve what you want to achieve. And I think the dating and the success and the where you're supposed to be in life, you're always being screamed at. And then you're being, talked at by your friends who want to validate their own decisions sometimes on things by wondering why you're not doing the same thing. And I think when you can step back and realize where other people are coming from, then you know how to parse out the advice and only take what you want. But there's a lot of noise out there, and it's, it's not fair, but it's also hard to turn down. And I think that was, my 40 to 50, that part we're talking about here, that was the noisiest decade. And until you figure out how to turn it down, you can't hear your gut, and you can't remember that you were once a confident person who could manage a lot of things. And I think that finding that you always have it in you. I believe everyone has it. So even if you're feeling like you're not a confident person, I think you could probably draw on a moment that you showed, real confidence and you were able to accomplish something. And if you can muster that up, that's worthwhile. A great book that I read was called The Confidence Code. And I highly recommend that because it was a very insightful look at why women lose their confidence and or why we don't have it and how to regain it. It was really fascinating. It was like I felt like I was reading the book of my life, story of my life of not sitting at the big conference table at a meeting at work because I thought those chairs were reserved for someone else, but you should pull up the chair and sit at it. These kinds of things. So yeah, I think the noise gets to us, and I think you got to look at where it's coming from. If some, who's saying it and why, both on a, self-help book or a coach, or they want to make money, or friends who want to validate their own decisions in life by kind of putting them on you.
Such a good point. I love the picture. You were talking about an actual situation, but I love the picture of pulling up a chair at the table of life. I think that I've kind of switched from midlife to peak life because somebody used that phrase and I thought that makes perfect sense. Midlife has kind of a drudgery sound to it. But peak life is like, look who you are, how far you've come, and all of the things we've done. I mean, if we were to sit down, you and I, Stephanie, and just start to brainstorm everything we've done, decisions we've made, places we've gone, things we've learned, books we've read, classes we've taken, it would fill a library, literally. I think as women, and men may struggle too, but I know for sure that women don't give themselves credit most of the time. We're busy pouring and pouring, but we're never looking and going, wow, I did that thing. and giving ourselves permission to sit down at the table of life, like to pull up a chair. That's what peak life is about. I'm done standing and eating my food standing up cold. No, I'm going to pull up a chair and sit down and have a full-blown adult meal.
I like that saying, peak life. And I think there's also this idea of, I think it's A types, always want to, refuse to believe there's not a fix or a solution for something. And I think that's part of it too, is that we're always chasing that. And so we don't take time to pull up that chair because, driven, successful women, they have to kind of fix everything, have to make sure everything is whatever. This is the judginess or this is our own self-imposed. We're all very hard on ourselves. I know I'm very hard on myself. But we all chase that because we refuse to believe we cannot solve this problem or we cannot fix this thing. And I think that keeps us away from taking that chair at the table and kind of taking your foot off the pedal a little bit and just sort of easing up. So I think there's something to that, I think there's something to, and then we're fed all the fixes and all these things that come our way. So we keep standing,
Mm-hmm. That is so true. I think that we have so much more potential than we give ourselves credit for. And I think that's true about a lot of women. And it is difficult to turn that noise down because some of the noise is coming from inside of our own head.
Oh, yes. That Greek chorus in my head is very loud and I listen to it far too often. And it's always going to come up and you got to figure out a way to, whatever it is, you got to figure out a way to turn it down. But I think, we could rule the world if we were given the chance. And I think that's, this is not to get into what's happening in the world right now or in the country right now. But if we had seats at that table, I think we could change the world. And I think that's something we forget or we don't give ourselves credit for, or we don't know we need to take those seats. And so there's a big picture discussion there to be had. But
understanding our own ability to have a say, have an impact, have value in what we're thinking and how we're engaging. And I think when that comes from an authentic place, not a place of needing validation or power or whatever, we can authentically sit at the table and we can authentically say, here I am, where I am, who I am at this moment, and finding the confidence in the value of who I am at this moment has great power. Because I think there's a balance between pursuing who we want to be, because obviously I'm with you on the Zen bending. I love self-help. I love that industry. I love what it can do, as long as it's not a whole bunch of like empty mantras and stuff, but it's ways to really identify things that need to change in my attitude, my mindset, that sort of thing. But we can get so caught up in that, and maybe you can speak to this. You can get so caught up in that chase, that Zen bending, that you don't really appreciate who you are, where you're at. Like, I am enough.
Well, that's sort of the epiphany that I had. I think it's, again, to this confidence thing and this taking the seat at the table. We think differently, but I think we all, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I think I always thought everybody else must be right. Everybody else probably knows more than me, even though I think the realization is I'm actually pretty smart, and I figured that out eventually. And I say that with as much humility as possible. But I think we find these people who sell us something, this self-help, and we completely cede power to them. And I think that's the thing to really consider is, I love it all too. So take a thread of it, take a tiny thread of something and work it into your life. We're not all wired the same. We all think differently. We all, dieting, one diet will not work for everyone. It should not be, applied to all. And I think that's kind of the thing that I discovered. So I did a chapter in my book called No Diet Left Behind. And I literally combined every single diet that I ever knew into a 6-week period, and I lost no weight. And I think because, there's a lot of stress involved in doing that. And instead of just going for a walk and like eating properly and, staying calm, and it was stupid. And we do that all the time. And then we forget, that's when we lose our gut. And that's when we lose our confidence, when we hand the whole house over to someone else, like the dating seminar on the shiny hair. Well, I fully thought that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. I also later was like, well, wait a minute, I actually have shiny hair. So maybe there is something wrong with me, And so things like that, but like something like a book like Marie Kondo, the thing I think is interesting about that is I Marie Kondoed. I did exactly what she said for 3 weeks. I even Marie Kondoed my freezer. I took it to the whole next level of clearing out, getting rid of anything that didn't spark joy. And did I write some, Academy Award winning movie because of that? No. Was that the promise? Well, maybe the doors were going to open up. But what I thought was interesting in this, and this is what I think from all of these self-help books, something else happened. I started to measure everything by this joy-o-meter. Does it bring me joy? Do I have to go eat dinner with those people tonight, even though I really only go out of obligation? No more. It empowered me to do that. I started being able to say no to things, which I thought was a whole new, I had a no problem. And suddenly I was empowered to say no to something that didn't bring me joy, including some crappy chocolate bar that I just ate because I was bored. How about wait till there's a really nice piece of chocolate that you must have once a week instead of crap that doesn't bring you joy? So there are all of these little threads that come from that you can pull. And that's as I've already said, but not to cede power, because once you hand it all over, then all of it breaks down. I don't think you have everything you need inside of you, but it gets muddled up by all that stuff you're hearing and all that noise.
I do. I totally agree with that. You have everything you need inside of you. Some of it might need to be dug up. Some of it might need to be polished. Some of it might need to be refurbished a little bit, but I love to help women identify their own answers. I think we get really addicted to people giving us the answers.
It's much easier to have to blame your, misstep on the self-help book you read rather than take ownership of a decision you made yourself. I think that makes it easier, but it doesn't feel as good. And I think also, it all those things make us stare down our shortcomings. It highlights our shortcomings rather than emphasizing all these things that are great about us. So I think you got to be careful with all of that stuff, because I think it can do that.
It can kind of tumble down into self-criticism.
Totally. I mean, look at the notion of a vision board in general, which is the gateway drug I write about. I make this vision board, and then suddenly every day I have to stare at the fact that I don't have all the things I put on my vision board, and it can make you a little crazy because you're taking it way too seriously. Like it should be fun. And then one person told me I put too many things on my vision board and that would get confusing for the universe. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Is that for real? Because it shouldn't be like that. And is the universe really offering up, Maseratis? I don't think so, but okay, I'll try, because I don't have a car, I live in the city. So, I think that's what happens. And then when you get too deep into it, that's what well, if there's all these fixes, there must be all these holes. And so I didn't know I needed to have shiny hair to land a man to show I'm fertile. Damn, And so that's these things you never even thought were wrong are all of a sudden all broken. And, this idea that, well, if it's out there, it's like a big bag of chips. I better consume the whole thing if it's sitting there. And it's the same with all these, all the offerings that are put out in front of us, flashing, like the Las Vegas Strip, you're broken, try this. And it perpetuates itself. And having said that, I think there's a placebo effect. I think taking on some of these things is great because it's action, anxiety is action. Maybe just the fact that you sit down to write a journal because the artist way told you to write a journal, or morning pages, they call it. Maybe that's great. Maybe it just gets you out of your head and starts thinking. I did astrology, my friend Elizabeth, and it was sort of around the time where I said, I feel like it's too late. I'm too old now. I think I was 49 at the time. I'm too old to do something new or great. She does my natal charts to the minute that I'm born. She said, no, you're put on this world to get some stuff done. And believe it or don't believe it, it was certainly inspiring. And it made me realize, okay, get back in the game, get to it, and I think if that works for you, then that was a great experience. If reading a book inspires you to go paint a picture, then great. That's wonderful. I think that that's all okay. But to make you feel worse about yourself, that's not good.
I think it's less about those experiences and more about what you take away from it. Like you're saying, it's how you perceive that experience. It's choosing to say, what can I learn from this? Not how am I falling short?
Totally. I mean, the numerologist, for example, does my numbers and tells me there's no way you're a writer. I don't see anything in your numbers that says you're a writer. I'm like, oh crap, that's a problem, because that's how I'm making my living and paying for this session. So, you gotta sift through this stuff, and so learn to get rid of the noise. One story I wrote about in there was a clairvoyant who told me my future was in making beaded tribal headbands, and and I was like, I don't know about that exactly. And she kept coming back to it. Are you sure you've never made these beaded tribal headbands? And I was really getting irritated because I'm like, no, 100%. I've never made a beaded tribal headband. I don't even know what that is. And she said, that's your ticket. That's it. That's the big thing. And would you believe it? At the end of our session, she's talking about, she had started to hit the mark, little things. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I did make a beaded tribal headband as a kid. I did. I went to this art class and made all these beaded headbands. Would you know it? And I texted my parents. I'm like, Mom, make Dad go in the basement and find those headbands. And they're still in the house, and they took a photo. So, whatever that story is, I don't know. It was kind of more hilarious, but I did not embark on a beaded tribal headband career after that. But I do tuck that nugget away and watch and see if that pops up somewhere in life.
That is really funny. You're getting on my nerves, lady, with the beaded tribal headband.
I was irate. I remember I'm like, I am not participating in this.
So as you're going through all of these things and you're feeling like, because it sounds like you've tried pretty much everything that's out there, which that's awesome. I think the book alone would be interesting just to kind of vicariously learn from your experiences. Because I don't think most people go to the degree that you did. But you mentioned something about obsessive compulsive in there.
Well, I didn't, until I Marie Kondoed, I didn't know I had this obsessive compulsive thing. So one of the obsessive things I didn't know, I always thought I was kind of breezy. I know I have anxiety, and I don't think anyone I know would call me calm, but I was always sort of go with the flow, go wherever you guys want to eat. That's fine with me. And then I renovated my kitchen, and all this decades of pent-up indifference came out in that kitchen, and I don't even know who I was, down to I'm thrilled because it came out great, but it all came out. I didn't know I was that, obsessive. Every single detail that could go into that kitchen was pre-planned and pre-organized, and I know the contractor thought I was sort of, beyond lunatic. But I was so specific about every single thing. And I remember I came in, and the unfortunate part is I worked during the day as a writer while they're renovating a kitchen in another room. And that was a huge mistake. In fact, I wrote this book while I was having a kitchen torn apart. So it was my exercise. My book on letting go became an exercise in letting go, because it just was awful. But anyway, I come in one day and I let them make one single decision, which I actually didn't know they were making. And I said, oh, you painted that trim, interesting paint choice. And they're like, you don't like it? I'm like, well, it's shiny, it's super shiny. Everything else in the kitchen is matte finish, and he was like, well, what would you have done? I'm like, it was like this moment I said, I might have matched it to the rest of the house trim that's matte finish, but let's leave it. Let's leave it. It's okay. And he goes, well, we can repaint it. I'm like, no, it's okay. And it's never been okay, but I never changed it. But, it's like every time I look at it, I'm like, "Ugh," but it's the one thing that would be changeable. But it's funny how obsessive you can get. And when I'm a recondoed my house now, every time my socks aren't folded in a happy manner, I'm a little crazy and I got to tear everything apart. So that was something I didn't know. I thought I could live with mess. I thought I was a little breezy, but I'm not.
You're like, which me do I like better?
That's a good point.
That's so awesome. I think that part of what I'm hearing from your story is that there are seasons and stages in our lives. I think it's easy for us to think we're supposed to be the same person all the way through, and maybe that's what hangs us up, right?
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
Maybe we pursue self-help to get back to who we think we are, when actually the journey is supposed to be more forward motion, more flexible and malleable, allowing those nicks and dings that we've experienced to better inform the person that we're becoming.
Well, most of it we look at as a magic wand, and we want to know the ending and we want to get there fast, but it's the nicks and dings that are the most interesting part of the trip. And if you can't enjoy the trip and look around, cliche, stop and smell the roses, but also the stink, that informs you, and that you definitely, there's no magic wand, and we search. That's what I think all of this stuff offers up, is this like very quick ending. Like, why do you go see a clairvoyant? So you know how the story ends. Well, how about experience the story first? Why do you read a self-help book? Well, if 200,000 people are experiencing the same problem you have, then that validates the problem. And so there's a book written about it. So it must be real, so you do that. But instead of just airing it out and kind of going along with it and experiencing it day by day, you learn so much from all the broken bits that I think the dings, as you put it, I think that you miss a lot when you want to skip to the ending and know where it's going. And we do that far too much. And that's a yogic thing or whatever it is, being present. And we forget that. We forget that all the time.
It's getting increasingly more difficult to be present in a lot of ways because our phones.
I was just going to say, I have iPhone-itis. Yep.
I've been thinking about that a lot in the last, few months. Just like, why is this phone in my hand? I don't even remember picking it up sometimes.
Oh, it's mindless. You're flipping through it. And you have to find things that you can walk away from that phone. Or sometimes I delete all the social media apps on the weekend and just delete them from the phone so that they're not sitting in front of me. And that actually helps. Maybe that's a little compulsive. I don't know. Maybe I should learn to live with them there and not go to the phone or put the phone somewhere. But it's hard. That phone has ruined it. Yeah, definitely. But it's also, you can FaceTime your mother, which you couldn't do before, which is nice. But you have to find these little activities that really take you out of it and, do something creative or go for that walk or whatever it is, because I agree, we lose that.
It's funny, all of these things kind of tie together as I'm thinking through our conversation. And I'm thinking that what this really comes down to is coming to peace with who you are, where you're at, figuring out what part of the journey you can treasure, kind of accepting the suck, embracing the suck, as my virtual mentor, Brendan Burchard, says, embrace the suck, because it's all part of the beautiful journey of our lives. And all of us have things that should probably potentially not be the way they are, right? We all have the nicks and dings have left maybe some residual damage. And I think that's all part of what makes people beautiful. And I know for myself, as I've worked through moving away from the job, right, to the doing something for yourself, is a journey of self-discovery. Who am I? What am I capable of? What do I really like to do? What do I want to do with my time? Do I want to take that walk? Do I want to, have matte paint or shiny paint? It's like really being present with the things that you're attracted to in your life. And you mentioned this is so funny. I was looking in your book about saying no, and then you went on and talked about saying no. And I thought, wow, she read my mind. Learning to actually say no, which I think for women is a very difficult thing to do.
Very hard. That was no as an answer too, was words of wisdom from my friend Sherry, when I'm like, oh my God, I've got to go to this. No is an answer too. And if you can remember that, it is great. And, another along those lines is, a lot of these books are about saying yes and, doing things, but I say no. And instead of this list of goals, list the things you don't want to do, that's okay too. I never want to jump out of an airplane ever.
Right.
I'm okay with that. And so get that pressure of all those things that you're expected to do. That was another friend of mine, Carrie, different friend, made that point. Why do we have to always, it's like all this stuff's coming at us. Why do we have to do all these things we don't want to do? It's okay to not want to do them.
That's so funny you say that, because I've actually said, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do. No, you don't. And then this is a side note, and then I'm going to ask you my final question, but weddings.
Yeah. I hate weddings. Sorry, I never want to go to your wedding.
But it's like, you have to feed them. No, you don't. It's your wedding. You don't even have to invite these people if you don't want to. And you should hear these conversations I have with people. And they look at me like I have 3 heads. They're like, yes, you do. I'm like, no, actually you don't. And you don't have to have cake, and you don't have to serve food. And you could meet on a beach, say I do, and let everybody figure out what they're going to do with themselves. Or you could spend $50,000. I don't know why you would do that, but you could, right? But here's all those things that we become accustomed to thinking we must do. And I think this is a season of life where we get to choose. Do we though? Right? Is that really my decision, or is it something I've adopted because, quote, everyone else is doing it, or my, quote, family does it this way, or whatever, bucking convention, and not in a total bad attitude sort of way, but in a more self-confident sort of way. Mm-hmm. So as we come to the end of our time together, I would love to have you kind of share 3 things that you really want people to take away from your story, our conversation. It could be something that we haven't talked about yet, but what are those things that you think would be a great gift to people who are hearing our conversation today?
Okay. Number 1, I think I would say, and it was the greatest little tidbit of advice someone gave me, everything's not about you. And I don't mean that in a kind of arrogant way. I mean that in if something doesn't happen for you, or you don't get called for something, it might not be about you. And that's a huge relief for a lot of reasons. So everything's not about you. Think about that every time you get disappointed in something, or maybe it didn't have anything to do with you or your skill or your person or whatever. As soon as you possibly can, find a way to accept, because acceptance to me is peace. And you may accept and then you don't accept again, but you'll get back there. Always try to get back to this place of acceptance, because when you keep spending your life swimming upstream, it is a lot of wasted energy, instead of just realizing, okay, these pants don't do up. I'm just going to buy another pair, and that's okay. So accept what you've got in front of you, because you waste so many years trying to avoid it. And I think this idea of, you've got the tools inside of you. And my book is bookended. Zen Bender starts with my dad saying, why can't you just be happy you have 2 arms and 2 legs, when I was a kid? Which I was like, what is that supposed to mean? To realizing in the end, he was right, because where I find my peace is walking and walking and walking. And that just requires, what my dad said, I should just be happy enough to have. And it's enough.
That's a really good phrase right there. It's enough. Not that you don't ever pursue more, but it's really finding joy and contentment with all the blessings and good things that currently exist in your life.
Right, because it's hard to see them sometimes when you're so fogged by all the things you're supposed to fix.
Yes, fogged. That's a really good word. We get fogged. We lose our ability to see.
Agree. Yeah, and that's it, because there are a lot of great things. Even a breeze on your face is great. Getting your hair blow dried once is, a treat that you should be, excited and grateful about. It doesn't have to be so grand. It doesn't have to be $1 million. It could just be something tiny. And I think that's what we lose sight of, is all the little tiny things are are worth our gratitude.
You know, it's funny. You mentioned gratitude, and I use Marco Polo with a handful of friends. It's just a great way to keep in touch. One of them it's a video chat app. And I was super duper opposed to it, by the way. When I was introduced to it, I was like, no, not another social media app. I can't cope. And then I was like, fine, I'll do it. Well, now I use it with like 3 people consistently, 4 maybe. And I find one day I was like with a friend of mine who's going through some things that are really difficult. I said, okay, let's do a gratitude practice. Every time we talk, we share 3 things we're grateful for. Well, then I was talking to another friend, forgot she wasn't the friend that I'd started that with. And I was like, okay, here's my gratitude things. And I was like, oh, sorry, different friend. I'm like, but hey, let's do it anyway. And so both of them, we try to end our conversations on Marco Polo with what we're grateful for. And the thing about the gratitude practice is no matter how the conversation has gone, like maybe we had a crummy day or, you know, just life is falling apart, or maybe it was a good day. It makes you stop and be present, like you said. Because for me, I love the sound of trees or the feel of the grass under my feet. And so it really does, you start running out of the big rocks to be thankful for, right? You're like, oh, I said that yesterday. And then you really have to begin to get present, which is the way of, I think, without being too kitschy, finding your Zen is being right here, right now, and being grateful, feeling the feels, the wind, the sounds, and allowing those moments of just being present.
I agree.
And then the crazy comes back.
And that's okay. You'll knock it out the next day with your gratitude.
That's absolutely right. Well, Stephanie, I want to thank you so very much for spending time with me today. It was great to meet you virtually. You're such a kindred spirit. I love what you have to share. Your book is a hoot and such a joy to read. And of course, now I know that you're a lot of fun to spend time with. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Yes. And I think that it's incredible that you've taken this journey and you found a way to find humor in your journey and to share something that is actually it's helpful. It may not be self-help, but it's really self-acceptance. And I really appreciate what you've written.
Thank you. I hope it makes people laugh.
I think it will. It's so good. So today I've been speaking with Stephanie Krikorian. She is the author of Zenbender. She's a journalist and a celebrity ghostwriter. If you head on over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 122, you will find links to find Stephanie and this wonderful little book, Zenbender, and anything else you need about her will be there, as well as if you leave your name and email, I have a special gift for you. Please comment, rate, subscribe, let people know that we're here. If this conversation hit you somewhere in a sweet spot in your heart, please share it with a girlfriend. Grab a cup of something wonderful, sit down, laugh with us, enjoy this conversation, and share. And as always, you do have the tools inside of you, my friends. This really is our peak life. No more looking back, my friends. Be present with who you are. Head forward in the future, knowing that your life has greater things in store. You have a wonderful week until we touch base next week. Take care, my friends. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.